I'm sure that some people are going to take this the wrong way, but I'm really getting tired of the word race being used in terms of, you know, who a person is, because it doesn't necessarily reflect or represent their culture or their personality or anything else, except for one thing, which in fact is biological. Um, there's these things called genomes. It goes along with why people of different quote unquote races or ethnic backgrounds or whatever you want to call it. Yes, we're all still people. Yes, we all bleed red. But we also have different genomes, which is part of the reason why this coronavirus, I'm sorry, COVID 19, because it's not the first coronavirus. Almost all viruses actually resemble the coronavirus just because it has little, like, they're little bitty, you know, cellular critters that have little, I think they're called phalanges, but anyway, they have little appendages that poke out and grab onto things almost entirely at random, but not without some level of simplified programming, uh, sensory reaction type stuff, period. Anyway, the COVID 19 affects people with different genomes differently, i.e., if you have the Asian Chinese um, genome, you're going to be affected differently in your chances of carrying or becoming infected by COVID 19 are different from somebody with the Russian genome, the Indian genome, the Native American genome. I say Native American because they were here before white people, but we don't necessarily even know if they were the first people here. I mean, really, come on, people. The crust of the earth is not terribly deep, and archaeologists can only go so deep into it, especially with the funding that they get for excavations. Therefore, with all of the surface disruptions like water and wind and fire and other things that are put into the soil, um, sorry, things can be displaced and or destroyed, sometimes entirely. So just because a certain culture happens to have their genome imprinted on the skeletal remains of buried corpses does not necessarily mean that they were there first, as in before anyone else. In fact, there is a site, at least one. In fact, there are others, but one in particular where a tree that was about 100 feet tall. I'm sorry, I'm not metric. What's that, about 28 or 35 meters? I'm not sure. Anyway, sorry, I live in America. We're idiots. Really. We don't even know how to protest or riot properly. So, anyway, the COVID 19 is actually more likely to affect you if you are African American in descent than if you are of. Oh, and by the way, Anglo Saxon is not the right word. That's why they use Caucasian, which still sounds worse and perverted. But Anglo Saxon means you're British in descent, actually. Hmm, the more you know. But yeah, a white person is actually less likely to be affected as severely as a black person. Oh shit, I used those terms. I'm sorry, but I don't know what people really want to be called, and I don't know how they expect me to know their background simply based on appearances or without them actually telling me. As a matter of fact, if you ever go to Alaska, which I spent several years in Alaska, it was told to me repeatedly when I first got there. I mean, it was emphatically put into my head that you do not refer to anyone in Alaska who looks like they have slightly darker skin, squinted eyes, and slightly larger bone structures as Eskimos or even Inuits, as there were many tribes, and in fact, that can be construed as a racial slur. It would be the same as calling them you people, basically, as in us and them. Now, see, even though we have these different genomes, though, and even though it does have a lot to do with our physical selves, in other words, color does actually go deeper than the skin, it is in the DNA, but we're all human. I'm really tired of them calling it racism and saying that we are of different races because it's not a race. We're not trying to beat each other somewhere. This isn't like the Russian American space race, which other countries were involved in, but apparently they're the only ones that get credit. So, anyway, the point is, let's stop calling each other whatever, and let's stop being offended if somebody says a black person did this, or a white person did this, or a yellow person did this, or a blue person did this, or a tranny person did this, because that is simply a way of explaining to somebody an obvious differentiation, a way of describing that person that anyone can immediately identify unless they are blind, which apparently we all should be. And I do mean that literally. I am not kidding when I say that. I'm starting to seriously think that if we all were blind and deaf and mute, that we would probably get along a lot better. But the ultimate point that I'm trying to point out is that regardless of whether you're human or animal or plant, yes, indeed, plants have brains and nervous systems. They do, in fact, feel. It's been proven scientifically. In fact, and you can look this up. I know it's the craziest thing you've probably ever heard. But broccoli has been shown to have an IQ of 10. It thinks. It is aware of itself. It does experience pain. So, all you vegans and vegetarians out there, just because you're not hurting animals by eating plants, you're still hurting a living organism. I'm sorry. So, you might as well eat the meat. In fact, I would eat human, except that eating human is septic to other humans. As a, you know, same genus, same species, uh, consumption. It was proved when they were feeding cows to the cows that mad cow disease evolved or was generated, and it's also been showed that cannibalistic cultures suffer from severe mental disturbances that are physically can be seen and witnessed visibly using, you know, brain scans and body scans and hormone scans. It's just not a good idea to eat your own kind, and we can't survive on dirts and minerals and water alone. And well, many native and naturalist cultures still believe that all things have a spirit. If you break a rock, you should apologize, but should you apologize to the rock or the atoms that make it up or the subatomic particles that make it up? You just can't. And because of that, we need to stop hating each other, but the thing is, you people think that you're trying to affect change by doing these protests and our lives matter and other lives matter and this thing matters and blah blah matters, and we're going to make it change by protesting or, you know, raising awareness. I just raised your awareness. But even if we kill every single person that is offensive or hateful, more people will be born and they will be hateful. You cannot eradicate hate, and you cannot eradicate sadistic, psychopathic dummies. You just can't. What you can do is practice de-escalation, peace, and avoidance, and in extreme cases, we have to contain and separate a certain person from the rest of civilized society because they simply can't help themselves or refuse to do so. That's what jails and prisons are for. It is to separate those who will not go along with the group peaceably. And if the group is not peaceable, well, that's when you riot. And I'm sorry, but peaceful protesting, yeah, I'm saying it. Screw you, internet. I am freaking saying it. Peaceful protests do not work. And the theory, the indoctrination that you can only affect change within the system is absolutely wrong. Once you join up with the system, think about a 3% piece of pie and a 97% piece of pie. Which one do you think is going to be more affected? Unless you're the COVID-19, you're not going to be able to make much of an effect in the system. You've got to tear it down. I'm sorry. You have to. And at least here in America and probably in many other cultures, yelling and chanting and putting up signs and camping is not going... They don't give a crap. It doesn't really even affect them. And when you're out there doing these protests and riots, especially the ones where you're tearing up your own community's private property, you're really effing up yourselves and your would-be friends. If you want to affect change, you have to get in the face of the authorities that enforce the negativity. And if they're not the ones doing it, hate the hater, rape the raper, fuck up the fuck up. But don't go around being a jackass, and don't do it if you aren't educated about the problem beyond some crazy propaganda, which all media is, period. Media's like weather, except it's man-made weather. That's right. See you next time. Peace and love.